Hey Waffle Gang, I hope you're holding up okay. My name's Daniel, and today I'm bringing you a story that, well, it's not easy to tell. It's about love lost, trust shattered, and a man who found himself erased from the life he built. If you've ever felt like the ground disappeared beneath your feet, this one might hit close to home. And if you find comfort in hearing others' journeys through pain and survival, maybe consider leaving a like or subscribing. Now, let's dive into today's story. This one comes from a listener who asked to stay anonymous, so we'll just call him Jay. His story begins over a decade ago, in a quiet town tucked into the edges of Colorado. Jay was 38 then. He'd spent years building a home with the woman he loved, raising 2 children together, and working hard to provide a life filled with small comforts. They weren't in a perfect place at the time. Money had been tight, arguments more frequent, but Jay never imagined he'd come home one evening to find moving boxes lined up like a silent army, waiting to evict him from his own life. He didn't even make it through the front door before being handed a court-issued protection order. The words blurred as he read. He couldn't return to the house, couldn't contact his wife directly, and couldn't see his kids unless she gave written permission. It was in effect for 90 days. No warning, no explanation, just gone. Jay was shattered. He found a couch to crash on at a friend's place, his belongings shoved into a duffel bag like he was some kind of fugitive. A cousin eventually connected him with a tough, sharp-witted lawyer, a woman who didn't mince words and didn't waste time. She filed a response to the protection order, but cautioned him these things moved slowly, and they wouldn't get a hearing before the 90 days expired. Until then, he had to follow every single rule. No exceptions, no missteps. One false move, and the court would see him as unstable, dangerous. Jay didn't want to give the court any reason to doubt him, so he obeyed. The very next day, his now ex-wife called, saying she needed him to watch the kids. But he had no home, nowhere to take them. They agreed he could come to the house to care for them, but only with written permission. He waited just a few blocks away in his car, refreshing his email again and again. The email never came. When she called asking where he was, he reminded her, no written permission, no visit. It happened twice more that first week. Each time he waited. Each time she forgot. He started refusing to leave the friend's house until he had the email in hand. One day they'd planned for him to take the kids to school since it was close to his work. But again, the email didn't come. He waited as long as he could, then ran out of time. His ex called in a rage when he didn't show up. He calmly explained, again, that without permission, he couldn't come. She was late for work, furious, and so she offered to send a blanket approval for future visits. His lawyer warned him not to accept that. Too vague, too risky. So Jay continued following the order to the letter. And then came the day that broke something in him. Once more, his ex forgot to send the email. Her new boyfriend was staying over but hadn't brought his car. Both of them needed to get to work but couldn't take the kids to school. She ended up calling a coworker for help, and that coworker noticed something that traveled fast. By the end of the week, the boyfriend, who, it turned out, was her direct supervisor, was fired, and Jay's ex, suspended. By then, Jay had managed to get his own small apartment. The kids started spending most of their time with him by necessity more than agreement. And then a bitter truth surfaced. The entire protection order? It was the boyfriend's idea, a strategy, a weapon. Jay's ex was livid when it backfired. The judge, after hearing how often she had to rely on Jay during the protection period, ruled there was no evidence he was a danger. In fact, the court found her actions to be manipulative, even cruel. During the custody and support settlement, she accused Jay of intentional and harmful parental alienation. But what choice did he have? He did everything right. He followed the law. He stayed away. He waited for emails that never came. He showed up when allowed. And in the end, he was treated like a criminal for simply existing in his children's lives. This is only the first half of Jay's story, one that started with malicious compliance and slowly turned into something else entirely, something darker, something colder. We'll get to that in part 2. But if there's one thing I can say now, it's that some wounds don't show up in medical charts. They sit in your chest. They settle in the silence between visits with your own kids. And no amount of court orders can make that pain feel fair. It's been nearly 3 weeks since that moment of bitter realization, the moment my ex-wife's boyfriend handed me, unintentionally, the means for a quiet kind of revenge. I didn't go looking for it. I wasn't plotting or waiting. I was just tired. Tired of all the years he got away with things, of the way I was cast out of my own life, of how he tried to rewrite the narrative while I kept my head down trying to rebuild what was left of mine. These days, my kids are almost all grown. 2 are in college now, and the younger ones, still in high school, split their time between me and their mom. I'm remarried. My wife and I, both in our early 50s, have found some rhythm together. She owns a silver Dodge minivan that's become the family vehicle. We only have one set of keys, and since the kids use it from time to time, I placed a small air tag inside it, mostly to track it in case the keys got misplaced. It was just a precaution. I never thought it would lead to what came next. About 3 weeks ago, one of my older boys borrowed the van for the night. Nothing unusual, just hanging out with friends. He ended up crashing on the couch at his mom's place. At 7 the next morning, another one of our kids asked if they could take the van to meet up with a study group. I opened the Find My app to check its location, and froze. The van wasn't in town. It was sitting in an industrial lot 2 towns over. My stomach dropped. I called my son, the one who had used it the night before, and he groggily confirmed he was still at his mom's, just like he said. Confused, I asked him about the van. That's when I realized he had no idea it was gone. I didn't waste time. I called the police and gave them the AirTag's location. Within 20 minutes, they pulled the van over. And who was behind the wheel? Her boyfriend. The same one who once orchestrated my removal from the house I helped build. The one who decided I didn't deserve access to my children without permission slips. The one who'd moved in while I was still trying to understand why I wasn't allowed to go home. When the officers called me back, they said he claimed he had permission to use the van. Of course he did. That's always the way it goes, isn't it? Bold lies. Casual deceit. They didn't want to press charges. It would have been easier just to have him drive it back. But it wasn't his vehicle. He wasn't listed on the insurance. And in Canada, that's enough to impound a car. They arrested him. It was small justice, but justice nonetheless. The next day, my wife and I took a long drive out to the impound yard. The van was parked low, and I feared something had happened. On the outside, it looked okay. But when I opened the back, my heart sank. The cargo area was filled, stacked high with heavy-duty cable, steel fasteners, conduit, industrial supplies, work materials. He'd stolen our vehicle to haul equipment for a job. My wife didn't say a word. She just turned on her heel and stormed into the office. I had to jog to keep up with her. She asked the staff who had access to the van, and they confirmed that only we had the keys. At that moment, I saw where she was going with this. I made it absolutely clear to the yard. No one touches that van but us. I even left them a small tip to ensure it would be moved to a secure part of the lot. We drove home empty-handed, hearts heavier than when we arrived. Not an hour after we walked through the door, the texts began. First from him, asking how soon he could get the equipment back. I told him plainly, The van stays until the impound and towing fees are paid. We weren't covering his theft. He cursed, swore he'd pay me back. I told him I didn't believe that for a second. Then his boss called. Said they needed the equipment urgently for a project. I calmly explained that it was impounded and we weren't going to retrieve it unless the costs were covered up front. He yelled. I stayed quiet. When he crossed the line, I hung up and blocked every number and email they had. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've stalled every pickup attempt. I've had to. My kids often need the van, and when they don't have it, I'm the one driving them. His boss tried calling from new numbers. He emailed constantly. I finally replied once, laying it all out. $25 a day for secure storage, towing fees, fuel, and round-trip time compensation for me and my wife. 4 hours in total. I even used the government mileage rate, 58 cents per kilometer. Paid for it. All of it. By the end, we'd racked up nearly $600 in costs. Last Friday, my wife and I made the long drive again. The van was ready. I brought a 12-pack for the impound staff as a thank you, picked up the keys, and took one long look at the cargo in the back. And then I made a call to the yard. Told them to unload the equipment and keep it in holding. Same rate. I wasn't going to be their delivery driver. And that was the end of that ride. For now. I didn't even look back as we left the lot. I had told the staff to unload the materials and store them separately under the same daily rate, and they assured me it would be handled before the weekend shut everything down. It felt like closure, but it didn't feel good. Nothing about this did. Not even the quiet satisfaction of justice served could cover the lingering grief of everything that had come before. We hadn't been home more than an hour when the call came in. It was him, my ex-wife's boyfriend. His voice was tight, rushed, already frustrated. He wanted to know when he could bring a work truck to pick up the supplies. I told him flatly that they were still at the impound lot, nearly 2 hours away, and the yard wouldn't reopen until Monday at 9. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, like he was holding back something ugly. I didn't give him the chance to let it out. I hung up after 10 seconds of nothing. Since then, I've been getting updates here and there from my ex. Oddly enough, we've managed to build a kind of decent rapport over the years. Strained, but functional. She's kept me in the loop mostly because she's furious with him. Not at me, not anymore. She said in no uncertain terms that whatever fallout came from this, it was all on him. And in truth, there's been fallout. He didn't lose his job, but he's been sidelined. No year-end bonus. No promotion. No raise. My ex said their company was too understaffed to fire him outright, but he's on thin ice, at work and at home. Apparently, their relationship has been tense, colder. She didn't say it outright, but I got the impression she's reconsidering the future with him. I asked if the Crown would pursue charges. She didn't know. I wasn't sure either. In Canada, criminal charges are handled by the state, not the victim, and I had no plans to sue him civilly. The cost wasn't just legal, it was emotional, and I've spent enough years bleeding out emotionally for that man already. Still, I can't lie, it rattled me that it came to this. That I had to become this version of myself just to feel like I was standing up for my own life again. When I arranged for the supplies to stay at the lot, I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just didn't want to give him another inch. He'd taken so much from me, from my kids, from my peace. That night, after the kids went to bed, my wife and I sat on the back porch with the last of the evening sun dying behind the trees. We didn't speak much. She rested her hand on mine, gently, and I realized just how far I'd come since those early days of court orders and sleeping on couches. But I also realized how much of me had been left behind back then, and how much I never got back. I don't think you ever truly heal from being treated like a threat to your own family. The kind of betrayal that comes with being forced out of your own house, away from your children, is hard to put into words. It changes the way you walk through life, makes you suspicious of open doors, makes you cautious with joy. When I got that call from the boyfriend asking about the gear, something inside me, something old and raw, flared up. And it wasn't revenge, not really. It was mourning. Mourning for the man I used to be, the man who trusted people a little too much, the man who didn't yet know that love can be weaponized. I think that's the saddest part of all this. It's not the money, it's not the hours I spent logging miles and invoices, it's not even the betrayal itself. It's the knowing. The constant knowing that there was a time when I would have bent over backward for that man just to keep peace in the family, for the sake of my kids. And he would have smiled and taken everything I gave him, knowing full well what he'd done. Now he's the one making desperate calls. Now he's the one pacing the floor, waiting for someone else to fix the mess he created. And I'm just tired. My wife says I handled it all with grace. She says I showed the kids what it means to stand your ground without becoming better. But I don't feel proud. I don't feel victorious. I just feel hollow. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't a win. It was just one more reminder that some relationships don't end cleanly. They linger. They echo. They pull at your peace, year after year, even as you try to rebuild. So when he calls again, if he calls again, I don't know what I'll say. Maybe nothing. Maybe silence is the only thing I have left to give him. And maybe that's the saddest answer of all. I try to stay optimistic when couples hit rocky ground, but sometimes I just don't see the road back. Some relationships aren't broken. They're emptied out, quietly, over time, until one day there's nothing left to salvage but silence and shared disappointment. That's how it seemed for a woman named Claire, who found herself in the same painful corner so many others have. Her husband, someone she once trusted with every vulnerable part of her, spent over a year begging for an open marriage. At first, she thought it was just a phase, something fueled by insecurity or midlife confusion. But the begging didn't stop, even when she cried, even when she told him how depressed it made her, even when she said again and again that she didn't want to share the man she'd built her life with. It wasn't about her, he said. She was still beautiful, still good. He just wanted to try something different, something new, something that didn't include her. So eventually, she gave in. Not because she wanted to, but because she loved him and she was exhausted, emotionally worn down from saying no and being ignored. She told him to go ahead, to do what he felt he needed to do. And he did, sort of. He didn't go all the way with someone else, but he pushed the boundaries far enough to claim his freedom. Along the way, he promised her that she could do the same, that she deserved to have her own fun, her own night out, her own connection. It was only fair, he said. At first, Claire wasn't interested, but eventually she started talking to someone who listened, someone who made her feel wanted again. The moment she told her husband she was actually going to follow through, just as he said she could, he broke. He couldn't sleep. He cried. He panicked. He told her he was terrified she would leave him, that he didn't think it would actually happen, that it suddenly all felt so real. She looked at him and saw a man reaping the very pain he had sown. She was furious, not just at him, but at herself, for enduring all the torment and sleepless nights, for pretending she was okay with it just to keep the peace. Now that she was doing exactly what he asked for, he wanted to change the rules. She told him if he tried to stop her now, she might leave him anyway, because what he did to her, what he put her through, felt too heavy to forgive. In her update, Claire admitted she wasn't sure what came next. They weren't getting divorced, not yet. She wasn't even sure if she still had feelings for the man she'd started talking to. He'd gone distant, pulling back before anything truly started. But her marriage felt like it was standing on cracked glass, and every step forward made her flinch. They'd had a few fights since then, the kind where everything comes pouring out. Not just the recent pain, but the old resentments they never dealt with. She said she'd never seen her husband look that broken. He cried again, told her he didn't know she'd been hurting so badly, that he didn't realize how far it had gone, that he was sorry. She wasn't sure how to respond. She still felt angry, empty, lost in all of it. And she wasn't alone. The comments flooded in, people who had been through the same thing. One person said they'd seen it too often. The man who becomes less attracted to his wife pushes for an open relationship, only to realize too late that his wife, whom he foolishly assumed no one would want, suddenly had options. While he, who thought freedom would come easy, found himself ignored, unwanted, and then he wanted to shut everything down again. Another user said men like him often overestimate their desirability and underestimate their wives. They don't understand that women, when given permission, can move on, can be wanted, loved, chosen, while they struggle to find anyone willing to match their fantasies. Others reminded Claire that being a single mom might be hard, but raising a child with someone selfish, someone who only thinks about his own needs, might be harder. That she didn't have to carry his pain on top of her own. That she deserved joy after everything she endured. One comment hit me the hardest. It came from a woman who had lived nearly the same story. Her husband begged for an open marriage. She resisted. When she finally agreed, she found a date before he did. He fell apart, begged her to cancel. They tried to reconcile. It worked for a few weeks, and then everything fell apart again. Because the problem wasn't the marriage. It was the disregard, the neglect, the quiet kind of betrayal that says, your feelings don't matter as much as my desires. And there was the story of a man who begged his wife to sleep with someone else so he could do it guilt-free. She did, with a friend. And when he couldn't find anyone of his own, she left him, ended up with the friend. Stories like this don't shock me anymore. They just make me sad. Because behind every open relationship gone wrong is someone who didn't want it in the first place. Someone who said no and wasn't heard. And sometimes that silence echoes louder than anything else. Daniel hadn't found anyone. That's what he finally admitted to Claire after weeks of tense silences and middle-of-the-night conversations. Maybe that was the reason he seemed so lost, because she had, at least for a while, connected with someone. And now that her own feelings were cooling, she wasn't even sure what to do with the pieces left between them. They'd talked about closing things off, starting therapy, trying to stitch back together what used to feel whole. But there was a shadow hanging over everything, something deeper than hurt, something they hadn't yet named. Claire had brought up something she'd been sitting on for months, her belief that Daniel had a porn addiction. Over the past year, she'd noticed how often he turned away from her, choosing screens instead of intimacy. She'd confronted him gently. He didn't deny it, said maybe she was right. He'd stopped since then, but the damage had already been done. He swore he felt guilty, that he never intended to hurt her so deeply, that he hadn't realized how far gone she felt, how isolated, how dismissed. Claire wasn't sure how he'd missed the signs, but she didn't press it. Because despite it all, she still saw the man who used to kiss her forehead every morning, the man who once stood stunned in the hospital hallway, tears falling as their son was born. He was still a good father, still, in many ways, a decent man. And maybe, just maybe, he was still someone worth fighting for. Claire had been divorced before, long ago, from someone who'd controlled her with fear and threats. Someone who used his strength to trap her, not protect her. Daniel wasn't like that, but sometimes she wondered if not being like the last one was too low a bar for the kind of love she truly needed. Still, she wanted to try, not because she had to, but because somewhere deep down she still remembered what they once were. Claire's story echoes the quiet heartbreak that many couples live through behind closed doors. The slow unraveling of connection, the search for validation in places that offer only temporary relief, and the devastating weight of unmet emotional needs. Her willingness to name the pain, confront hard truths, and still choose empathy is something we can all learn from. In real life, toxic patterns don't always look like shouting or violence. Sometimes they show up as neglect, indifference, or emotional withdrawal. If you're in a relationship where your needs are consistently overlooked, or worse, dismissed, it's essential to speak up, document your feelings, and consider outside help like therapy or support groups. Also, don't compare your current partner only to your worst past experience. A relationship should be safe, yes, but it should also be nurturing, reciprocal, and emotionally fulfilling. Settling for not abusive is not the same as being loved well. If you suspect a partner may have a behavior or addiction problem, like with porn or emotional detachment, it's okay to draw boundaries. Healing begins with honesty, and that includes being honest with yourself about what you deserve. You're allowed to want more, and you're allowed to leave if more never comes.